Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question that might shake you at your core. Who is your greatest enemy? Now, before you go pointing fingers at your boss, your ex, the economy, or even the government, hold up. I want you to really think about it. Your greatest enemy is not external, it's internal. Most people spend their lives pointing fingers at everything around them. They blame the economy, their childhood, their education, their lack of connections, or their current circumstances. They look for someone or something to hold responsible for why they aren't where they want to be in life. And while those things can have influence, they are not the deciding factor. The deciding factor is the internal dialogue, your thoughts, beliefs, fears, and habits. That's where the real enemy lies. It's easy to spot an enemy that comes at you from the outside. If someone lies to you, cheats you, disrespects you, that's obvious. You can see it, name it, and confront it. But the enemy within is sneaky. It hides behind logic, disguises itself as caution, and whispers words that sound wise but are actually destructive. Maybe this isn't the right time. What if you fail? What will people think? You're not ready. These are not just passing thoughts. They are the chains that keep people bound to a life of mediocrity. And here's the dangerous part. When the enemy is internal, you often mistake it for truth. You begin to believe that voice that says you're not enough. You accept the narrative that other people were meant to succeed, not you. You buy into the story that your background, your past mistakes, or your current limitations define what's possible for your future. That's not truth. It's self-sabotage dressed as realism. The greatest enemy isn't the competitor who opened a shop across the street. It's not the boss who overlooked you, the friend who betrayed you, or the economy that turned down. Those are challenges, yes, but they are not the enemy. The real enemy is the fear you felt and didn't confront, the procrastination you justified, the self-doubt you fed instead of starving, the dreams you buried because of imaginary limits. When people say, the odds are stacked against me, they rarely realize how often they are stacking those odds against themselves. They don't apply for the opportunity because they assume they'll be rejected. They don't launch the business because they convince themselves they're not ready. They stay in the wrong relationship, the wrong job, the wrong mindset because the internal enemy keeps them chained to a lesser version of themselves. And here's what's even more tragic. This internal enemy doesn't shout, it whispers, and it whispers in your own voice. It tells you to play it safe. It tells you to wait. It tells you not to try too hard because it might hurt more if you fail. That's not your protector. It's your prison guard. It doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you stuck. There are people out there with fewer resources, fewer connections, less experience, who are succeeding not because the world is easier for them, but because they stopped letting their inner enemy run their life. They stopped feeding the fear and started feeding their faith. They took action in spite of uncertainty. They silenced the voice that said you can't and started listening to the one that said, what if you can? This isn't about ignoring reality. It's about redefining it. Because the most dangerous thing about the internal enemy is that it convinces you that this limited version of life is all there is. It narrows your perspective, shrinks your confidence, and kills your creativity. It takes your vision and clouds it with doubt until you can't see anything beyond the next excuse. And if you don't confront that enemy, it doesn't just sit quietly in the background, it grows. It becomes stronger every time you give in to fear, every time you justify delay, every time you pretend to be less than who you are. It robs you of time, of energy, of purpose. And the worst part, it does it with your permission. You've got to understand that the greatest battles you'll ever fight won't be with other people. They'll be with yourself. They'll be in the quiet moments of indecision, in the late nights of anxiety, in the silent justifications you make to stay the same. That's the real war, and the battlefield is your mind. The inner voice of doubt is the true obstacle to destiny. That voice doesn't come from your environment. It doesn't come from the people around you. It doesn't even come from your circumstances. It comes from within, quietly, subtly, and consistently. It's the voice that questions your ability right before you take the first step. It's the voice that reminds you of every past failure when you're about to try something new. It's the voice that suggests playing it safe when your heart is pushing you to take a risk. What makes the voice of doubt so dangerous is its familiarity. It doesn't sound foreign, it sounds like you. It speaks in your language, your tone, your thoughts. It doesn't yell. It whispers, calmly, logically, with just enough truth to sound believable. It says things like, "This might not work," or "You're not ready yet," or "Maybe you should wait until things are more stable." These aren't wild lies, they're subtle distortions. That's why they're effective. That's why they're dangerous. Many people think the reason they haven't achieved their goals is because of some external barrier: lack of resources, lack of time, lack of support. But more often, it's that voice of doubt that stopped them before they even got started. They didn't need anyone else to discourage them. They did it themselves. That internal resistance held them back longer and harder than any outside obstacle ever could. You can have all the talent, strategy, mentorship, and opportunity in the world, but if the voice inside of you keeps whispering, "You're not good enough," eventually you'll believe it, and once you believe it, you'll start to act like it's true. You'll shrink in rooms where you're supposed to shine. You'll avoid opportunities where you're supposed to lead. You'll hesitate in moments where you're supposed to move boldly. Doubt is a thief, and it doesn't steal all at once. It steals slowly. It robs you of confidence one moment at a time. It convinces you to hesitate. It delays your decisions. It keeps you in a holding pattern while your potential sits dormant. And as time goes on, you don't just doubt your next move, you start to doubt your very identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone capable of achieving greatness. You settle for being average, not because that's who you are, but because that's what you started to believe. Here's the truth: everyone hears that voice. No one is immune to doubt, but the difference between those who rise and those who remain stuck is this: those who rise recognize the voice for what it is. They don't allow it to define their decisions. They act in spite of it. They take the step anyway. They trust that their purpose is bigger than their fear. And over time, the voice of doubt gets quieter, not because it disappears, but because they stop giving it authority. The voice of doubt may speak first, but it doesn't have to speak loudest. You get to choose what voice you amplify. You get to choose what belief you build your actions on. If you continue to let doubt set the limits, you'll live your whole life inside a cage made of your own thoughts. But if you confront that voice, expose it, and move anyway, you'll discover that destiny was never out of reach. It was just waiting on the moment you stopped listening to the lie and started living the truth. Comfort is the killer of calling. It doesn't show up with warning signs. It doesn't come with alarms or flashing lights. It feels good. It feels safe. That's why it's so dangerous. Comfort is subtle, seductive, and socially accepted. It tells you you've done enough. It says you deserve to rest. It whispers, stay here where it's predictable. But comfort is where potential goes to die. Every person with a calling, a dream, or a vision will reach a point where they have to choose between comfort and purpose. And the truth is, they rarely coexist. Your calling will stretch you. It will disrupt your schedule. It will push you into rooms where you feel unqualified. It will demand more from you than you thought you could give. And if you prioritize comfort, you'll always resist the very process designed to make you who you were born to be. Comfort keeps you in jobs you've outgrown. It keeps you in relationships that drain you. It keeps you repeating routines that no longer serve your growth. It convinces you that good enough is better than the risk of the unknown, and because the pain of staying is quieter than the fear of changing, you stay. You shrink, you stall, you settle, but your calling doesn't live in comfort. It lives in discomfort, in challenge, in pressure. It lives in the leap, the risk, the sacrifice. Every level of growth you've been praying for lives on the other side of your comfort zone. The income you want, the influence you desire, the impact you were created to make, it's all beyond where you are right now. And the only way to access it is to leave the space that feels easy. This is why most people don't walk in their calling. Not because they lack talent, vision, or opportunity, but because the cost of discomfort feels too high. They don't want to be misunderstood. They don't want to be criticized. They don't want to fail publicly. So they play small in private. They silence their dreams. They wait for a perfect time that never comes. Comfort is the slow death of destiny. It doesn't kill dreams overnight. It kills them in tiny doses. One excuse, one delay, one missed opportunity at a time. And because life still looks fine on the outside, most people never realize what they've lost. They're alive but not living, busy but not fulfilled, surrounded but not seen, successful but not satisfied. If you want to access your calling, you must become willing to be uncomfortable. You must be okay being the beginner in the room. You must be okay trying and failing. You must be okay taking steps that others don't understand. Because calling requires courage. It requires a mindset that says, I'd rather be uncomfortable growing than comfortable dying. The break through you're waiting on isn't coming to where you are. You have to go to it. And that journey will cost you your comfort. It will challenge your routines, your thinking, your excuses. But that's the point, because your calling is not about who you are right now, it's about who you're becoming. And that version of you will never emerge if you stay in the same place, doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts. Excuses disguise themselves as logic and safety. They rarely show up looking like weakness. They don't announce themselves with a sign that says, here's why you're not moving forward. Instead, they wear the mask of reason. They sound intelligent, they sound responsible, they sound like you're being mature, careful, or realistic. That's why they're so effective and so dangerous. You say things like, now's not the right time. That sounds logical. You say, I just need a little more information. That sounds smart. You say, I have responsibilities. I'm not ready yet. Or what if it doesn't work? And all of that sounds like wisdom, but in many cases it's not wisdom. It's fear dressed up as rationale. It's self-protection pretending to be strategy. The human brain is wired for survival, not success. So when something feels risky, uncomfortable, or unfamiliar, your mind creates a story to avoid it. That story becomes the excuse, and over time, if you repeat it enough, the excuse becomes your truth. You stop questioning it, you start living by it, you build your decisions on it, and without realizing it, you create a life around your limits, not your potential. Excuses are clever. They give you permission to do nothing while feeling justified. They allow you to delay your dreams without guilt. They tell you that your conditions must change before your actions can, and so you wait for more time, more confidence, more clarity, more resources. But none of those things are guaranteed, and while you wait, life moves on, opportunities pass, doors close, and potential remains unrealized. The real problem isn't the excuse, it's the agreement you make with it. When you agree with the excuse, you surrender your power, you give up your ability to choose, act, grow, and lead. You begin to believe that circumstances control outcomes instead of realizing that choices create outcomes. That's the trap. That's how you stay stuck. It's easy to spot excuses in others. You hear them and immediately know what's really going on. But when it's you, the excuses sound true. That's why self-honesty is essential. You must develop the discipline to call yourself out, to say, this isn't strategy, it's fear, to say, this isn't planning, it's procrastination, to say, this isn't timing, it's avoidance. Growth begins when you stop lying to yourself in the language of logic. When you stop using, I'm just being cautious, as a cover for hesitation, when you stop calling doubt discernment, when you admit that what's holding you back isn't what you don't have, it's what you're unwilling to confront. Excuses will always be available. They're easy to access, socially accepted and personally comforting, but they cost you more than you can afford. They cost you time, progress, credibility, and ultimately purpose. And the longer you use them, the more normal they feel. The shift happens the moment you choose responsibility over rationalization. The moment you say, even if I'm scared, I'll take the step. The moment you stop looking for perfect conditions and start acting with imperfect faith. Because it's not the absence of excuses that creates change, it's the refusal to accept them. Transformation begins with confronting the mirror. Change doesn't start with a new strategy, a new environment, or even a new opportunity. It starts with a new level of honesty, and the only place you can find that kind of honesty is in the mirror. When you're faced with yourself, stripped of blame, stripped of excuses, stripped of the image you show the world. That moment is where real transformation begins. The mirror doesn't lie, but most people avoid it. Not the physical mirror, but the internal one. The one that reflects your mindset, your habits, your decisions. It shows you the gap between who you are and who you could be. And that's uncomfortable, because it means admitting the role you've played in your own delay. It means acknowledging that you've tolerated more than you should, settled for less than you deserve, and postponed action longer than necessary. You can't change what you won't confront, and you can't confront what you keep avoiding. Many people think they're stuck because of something external, waiting on someone to say yes, waiting for a door to open, waiting for the right season. But they're really stuck because they've never looked at the person in the mirror and said, "It's me, I've been holding me back." That level of ownership is rare, but it's powerful. Because once you accept responsibility, you reclaim your authority. You realize you're not a victim of your story. You're the author. You get to rewrite it, reshape it, and redirect it. But that shift only happens when you stop running from the truth and start running toward it. The mirror shows you patterns, not the one-off moments you like to highlight, but the consistent habits you don't talk about. The late night scrolling, the unfinished projects, the conversations you avoid, the commitments you break to yourself. It reveals the contradiction between what you say you want and how you actually live. And when you see it clearly, you can finally start doing something about it. Transformation requires brutal honesty followed by bold action. You can't just acknowledge the gap, you have to close it. And you do that by changing your choices. By shifting your priorities, by showing up differently, day by day, moment by moment, but none of that starts until you stop performing and start reflecting. The mirror won't lie to you, it won't flatter you. It won't negotiate with you, but it will free you, if you're willing to face it, because the moment you confront the real you, you gain access to the future you've been dreaming about, not the future shaped by opinions, fear, or past mistakes, but the one shaped by purpose, clarity, and commitment. Everything changes when you change, and you won't change for real until you face who you really are, where you really are, and what you've really been doing with the time, talent, and vision you've been given. That truth might hurt, but the lie has been hurting you longer. Your future waits on your decision, not your conditions. Most people delay progress because they believe their circumstances have to be perfect before they take action. They wait for more money, more support, more clarity, or a better environment, but that mindset keeps them stuck. The truth is, your future isn't controlled by your current conditions. It's created by the decisions you make in spite of them. Decisions move things, they shift momentum, they break cycles, and while conditions can influence your path, they do not determine your destination. Too many people are negotiating with their future based on temporary realities. They tell themselves, when things calm down, I'll start, or when I feel more confident, I'll take the leap. But life doesn't work like that. If you wait for conditions to be ideal, you'll wait forever. Greatness begins when you stop waiting and start deciding, not deciding passively, not deciding eventually, but deciding with finality, choosing to show up, to act, to commit, regardless of the fear or discomfort. Every breakthrough begins with a decision, not a wish, not a hope. A decision. You don't need certainty to decide. You need clarity of intention. You need conviction that where you are is not where you're meant to stay. That alone is enough to begin. Because most progress happens not when the path is clear, but when the commitment is strong. The strength of your decision will create the conditions you think you need. It's not about having everything figured out, it's about refusing to stay where you are. One decision can unlock doors that have been closed for years. One decision can shift your mindset, attract the right people, and trigger opportunities you didn't even know existed. But none of that happens if you stay stuck in indecision, waiting for the stars to align. Indecision is a form of fear. It feels like prudence, but it's really paralysis. It gives you the illusion of control while keeping you stuck in the same patterns. But when you decide, really decide, you activate your future, you send a signal that you're ready, not perfect, not fully equipped, but willing. It doesn't take a new year, a new season, or a new situation. It takes a new decision, one that says, I'm done waiting, one that says, this is the moment, one that says, no more excuses, no more delays, no more settling. Because the life you want isn't going to show up at your door. It's waiting on the other side of the choice you've been avoiding. You've looked for enemies in the world around you, but the real battle has always been within. The fear you feed, the doubt you entertain, the comfort you cling to. These are the enemies robbing you of purpose. And the moment you stop blaming conditions and start making decisions, everything changes. You don't need more time, more approval, or more resources. You need a made-up mind, because the life you were created to live, the calling you were born to fulfill isn't waiting on permission. It's waiting on you. Decide, move, conquer the enemy within, and the world outside won't stand a chance.